right. Well, I'll kind of kick us off. So thanks for joining us today. Shelly and I are really excited to speak to some fellow founders about wellness and what it means to be well as a founder, and why really paying attention to founder wellness and mental health, why this is so important to the health of an organization. So I'm Jen Labanowski. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with United Counseling and Wellness. And I'm here with my partner, who will introduce herself in just a second. But we have been for quite a few years now. We run United Counseling and Wellness together. And in our experience as therapists, and specifically as systemic therapists, we've really realized how much a healthy co-founder relationship and two healthy co-founders are so vital for a healthy business. And so we love to talk to other founders about being well and keeping the system functioning well. So that's what we're here to chat about today. Shelly?
And I'm Shelly Smith. I'm the other half of the co-founder in the situation. So again, we co-founded United Counseling and Wellness a handful of years ago to kind of grow and do something a little bit different in the therapeutic space. And that has led us on this fascinating journey of learning about all of the different aspects of trying to stay well while you're navigating the complexities and the busyness that it takes to grow and scale a business. So,
yes. And founder wellness was an important topic before, but especially then founder wellness in a pandemic is even more important and difficult. So yeah, that's what we'd like to talk to you about today. So Shelly, maybe we'll just get off and get started.
Okay. Dive in and let me navigate all my slides here.
Yeah.
That's the fun part, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about wellness, since we're both licensed marriage and family therapists, we were trained systemically in our therapeutic models. And as we are then becoming founders, growing practice, we see very clearly the distinctions between how wellness at the founder level then scales to the team level, which scales to the full organization level, and back down again. The systemic wellness of an organization starts from having healthy founders, or whatever culture, communication, we'll get into bits and pieces of that, but having a healthy culture in your entire organization doesn't just happen accidentally, of course, right? It takes a lot of intentionality, and it takes leaders really doing the work of implementing emotional and mental wellness within their own lives, infusing that in the way they are then also at work, and both intentionally and actively, but then also just in the way of being that filters to the rest of the system. And so there's a lot of different organizational pieces to that. We're not going to get into in a lot of detail today. We're going to really, in the 45 minutes we have, stick to some specific elements of that. But we think of how, from an individual or co-founder level, things scale, right, at different stages. And we have us, we have our teams, we have our organization, and back down again. And we really need all of them to be healthy. And so doing this good, hard work is essential in making sure that at all levels you're able to keep the system healthy and the culture and the positive attitudes going long term.
Absolutely. And I think if we want to look like at a quick parallel for what a healthy system looks like, and how much a healthy leader matters. If you think about families for a second, right, or couples, families, think like we're all used to hearing you shouldn't get into a relationship until you have like a good relationship with yourself, or until you are happy and healthy being alone, right? And I think we all would probably agree that that a family can't be healthy and kids can't be well if their parent is not well, right? And so a lot of those same principles really do apply to the startup world, right? Because the smaller a team, the less it functions like an organization and the more it functions like a family, right? Because there's so much on the line often and so much pressure, and people are complicated and weird. And so to try and keep towards goals and accomplish all the things that you set out to accomplish, really the team has to be healthy, and that comes from the founder. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So where we want to kind of go next is to sort of, instead of launching right into what are some things that can be done to make a healthy founder, we want to first look at, how do you know when founder wellness is missing, right? Because it's kind of a murky concept, right? So we look at these 4 different categories and see that if there is a lot of uncertainty and insecurity, right? Things feel very unsure, like you can't quite find your footing. That might mean that founder wellness is missing, right? If there is a lot of restlessness and confusion, that might mean that founder wellness is missing, right? If there is isolation and disconnection, again, could be missing. If there is exhaustion and burnout, that also could be an indicator. And all of these things could be present, occasionally or low level, pervasive all the time. They could be appearing within the founder themselves. They also could be appearing in other team members, right? So what we'd like to kind of do right now is pause a little bit, because we figured we wouldn't have a ton of people here. Everybody's so busy, and we really appreciate people taking the time to talk about this, and we want to give you something really valuable for the time that you're putting in today. So we'd like to turn it over to you guys for just a second. If you would be willing to put into the chat if any of these particular categories resonates the most with you, tell us which one, and then maybe if you can even tell us a little bit about the size of your team or anything else that you might want to share, so that we really can sort of cater today's conversation to something that would be directly applicable to your lives and your teams and your organization. So I'm just going to pause for a minute, and anyone who's willing to just tell us which of these categories feel most relevant, and how big your team is, or anything else you'd like to share. Okay, so for us, exhaustion and burnout, Shelly and I have both been there.
We know what that's like. We've been there.
Yeah, Alex, same for you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Give it just another minute. Okay. So anybody else who wants to throw something into the chat, please feel more than welcome, but we'll sort of keep going. So how do we try and prevent or reverse these situations, right? And we'll really spend our time focusing on exhaustion and burnout. And Chris, you said part of a large organization, probably more category 1 for you, the uncertainty and the insecurity. So let's talk about what we can put into place then to reverse or prevent these issues.
Absolutely.
Okay, so really, we do believe that that the things that need to be in place to reverse uncertainty and insecurity, we're probably seeing some issues with boundaries and with balance, right? In order to, I'm just looking at these slides and thinking, man, I should have kept the problems on the slide. But in order to reverse restlessness and confusion, we may need to increase emotional intelligence, in order to reverse isolation and disconnection, we might need to focus on communication and culture. And in order to address exhaustion and burnout, we're looking at self-care and restoration. And Jim, you said, let's talk about the mental health of military veteran-owned businesses. That's an excellent suggestion. And I think that Shelly, what we can sort of build in, whether we're talking about a veteran-owned business or any other organization, I think really paying attention to, we have long lives before we start our businesses, right? With a variety of experiences, and oftentimes the stressors and pressures of running an organization or starting a company really push us into our past in different ways, and sometimes our past works for us really well, and we're able to pull skills that we developed over the course of our lives and use those to be really exceptional founders. And sometimes we realize that there are specific challenges. Also, the value of mental telehealth as a maintenance platform. Yes, and Shelly and I love to talk about telehealth. We believe in online therapy and all that it's capable of, and we don't want anyone to feel like we're pitching or pushing for therapy. And so you asked, so we will make sure that we share a little bit. But therapy, and specifically online therapy, can be an excellent resource for founder wellness. So I think that the two things that we want to focus most heavily on, based on what we're hearing from you guys today, is that that boundaries and balance would be really important to look at, and then also self-care and restoration. So let's talk first about boundaries and balance. And if anyone wants to throw any other questions into the chat, please feel more than welcome. Okay.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to boundaries and balance. If you want to keep working in that chat, we are curious sort of what you found to be the biggest challenges in keeping healthy boundaries. Or when we kind of talk about, I feel like it's a bit cliche, but to talk about kind of the idea of like this elusive like balance, right? As founders, that's particularly tricky to try to find. And so if there are challenges that you've noticed in trying to have that balance, or trying to figure out how do you keep boundaries, we'd love to kind of hear your questions and that sort of thing about those in the chat as we're talking about them.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times when we hear conversations about work-life balance, we don't always recognize that this is really a conversation about boundaries, right? But if we think about boundaries as these invisible lines in our life that sort of differentiate like us from others, we look at sort of how we stay protected but also connected, right? And to find healthy balance in a career for anyone is typically a struggle, right? But I think especially for founders, when your business is also your baby, it can be especially hard to set it down, or to say, okay, the day is done. I'm not going to work anymore, because it's not like some giant organization that's going to either win if you put in the time, or you win if you rest. It's going to feel like, well, you're going to win if you put in that extra time, and you're going to win if you rest. And the reverse of that, right, is like you lose and you lose, right? And so I think it's especially difficult for founders to protect their goals, and especially when they know that their time often can't be replicated by someone else, right? I think Shelly, how many founders do we talk to that that just say like they just wish that they had a couple of clones because they could delegate as much as they want to other people, but then they have to train other people to think like them, know the things that they know, and really they find that their experience can't be replicated often. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so when we're talking about having boundaries, I feel like when we talk with founders, I often initially hear this first sort of message from them around like, oh, that would be great, Shelly, but it's not realistic, right? And that's part of the struggle, is feeling, just like Jen was saying, that you have to be doing all the things in all the places, or the goals won't be met because you can't be replicated, right? And it's hard to figure out how to make that happen, and how to kind of have boundaries, and then also do what we're going to talk about a little later with the restorative practices, right? Of being able to kind of calm ourselves in the moment outside, to be able to enjoy the time when we do put in boundaries, instead of just letting our brains continue going at high speed, right? While we're on our off time. We're often still mentally doing the job, or figuring out the next thing, or what it is we have to do. And so typically when we're talking with people, we start at least thinking a little bit about, what do those boundaries currently look like, and where can we just start small, right? In terms of implementing a little bit, as Jen was referring to boundaries being sort of the invisible lines that we have around us, between us and other people, us and different aspects of our lives, thinking about those almost concretely, as if they are visible lines. And what do those look like currently? What is sort of your ideal version of what you want those to be, right? However realistic that may or may not be. But then doing a little assessment. And I love paper and pen. As much as I live in the tech sphere and I'm on platforms all day long, give me a pencil and paper to like really scribble things out, right? And so I often will take, just a mental, or just a graph of kind of what's going on in my head, of like, where are those boundaries and where are those lines, and where can I just eke out a little bit, right? Because it's unrealistic for us to be able to have like very clear lines all the time. That's not going to happen. But to even make it a little better, right? To figure out how to start the practice and the habit of having those boundaries is really important. So like anything else, I kind of think of boundaries as a practice, something that we learn to very slowly implement a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit healthier. And sometimes, right, we lean more to one side of a line than the other, and that's going to happen. But to really be thinking about them regularly and kind of outlining those and doing our own little assessment around that. And how am I doing? Knowing that it's a practice.
Alex, I see your question about, are there any helpful ways to create that boundary and separation while spending so much time working from home? I'm so glad you asked, because I think maybe for a lot of us right now, we are primarily working from home, and that whole work-life balance thing just got so much more complicated for everybody back in March, right? And I think that really sort of delineating work time and rest time is ideal, but not always that realistic, right? So then it's sort of putting in a reinforcement of work space and rest space, or whatever. Shelly knows that for the first couple, actually Shelly and I were both in the same situation. For the first few months, we were both working out of our bedrooms, turned kind of our bedrooms into our home offices, which meant that with the hours that we were working, especially in March, April, May, that we were spending, I don't know, maybe like 22 hours a day in one room, right? Which is absurd, absolutely ridiculous, right? And of course, not everybody has like the luxury of space, right? But even if that means, so if there's not a home office available, creating a small workspace that is the only place where work gets done, it really can truly be helpful. Or even if that's just like an area in the room, and that if you're not in that space, your brain tends to take that more as a cue, right? There's a lot of things that are going on in our brains at any given moment that we're not fully aware of, but our brain is constantly trying to like process the environment and take signals and say, okay, so what do I need to be ready? What do you want from me, right? And if you are doing a lot of working on your laptop in your bed, then when you lay down at night, your brain sees the sheets and sees the pillow and says like, okay, is it time for conference calls, right? And that can be really, really confusing, right? So trying to separate space as much as possible, you can get creative with it. That really can help. Shelly, did you want to?
Yeah, I think the second thing, I finished with that. The second thing that I've been encouraging people to do and talking to them about is essentially like figuring out what your new commute looks like. Right?
Exactly.
We often use, historically, many people, if they weren't working out of their homes already, right, had some sort of transitional time, right? Whether that was, a drive or,
Does anybody else miss their commute as much as I do? Because it was beautiful.
Right?
It was 25 minutes.
No one's interrupting, hopefully. And we often figured out just sort of naturally like practices that helped us transition from one place to the other, right? Whether that was listening to something that you enjoy or having all of those conversations and saying the things out loud that you would have never said to the person in the space that you were in before during the day, or whatever it was, kind of decompress during that transition time. And one of the problems with being in our homes to work at this point is to really have some sort of transition in the same way, right? And even if you are struggling like we did back in early pandemic of like having to like sleep and live, I felt like I was back in college in a dorm, like sleep and live and work in the same space. It really made a difference to think about, okay, I am going to set up my office in the morning and I am putting it away at night, right? And like tangibly putting away the things that I was using, or going for a short walk around the block, right? Or, trying to like still listen. I'm noticing Forrest talking about podcasts with the screen.
I know.
Right? And like listening to those podcasts is not the same, but I'm not ashamed actually to say that I have locked myself in the bathroom and to just listen to that podcast for a few minutes on my own, or, whatever that is, but like carving out some specific time to help you mentally transition from work to home, from home to work, even if your physical space isn't changing that much. Having those sorts of transitions that you kind of intentionally carve out for yourself can really make a big difference.
Well, and I think also like talking to, if there are, other people in your home, right, thinking about their expectations as well. My husband used to ask me like, when will you be home, right? And if maybe that was 6:30, that meant that like there was going to be dinner ready and my family would be waiting for me at 6:30 to come and eat, right? And the question has shifted to when are you going to be done? Right. And what I started at the beginning of pandemic, I would give him like, okay, my last meeting ends at 6 o'clock or whatever. Right. And then at 6:05, where I'm still trying to like end out the day or whatever, I'm already 5 minutes late because I told him that stop time, or the ideal stop time of my last meeting or whatever. Right. And what I've realized is I need to start thinking about going back to that question of like, when are you going to be home? And like, even though I'm home all the time, when am I going to really be present? Oh, like 6:30, right? Like that. And that was synonymous with when are you going to be home before, right? It's different now. And I also sort of joke around with my family that, that like, I'll sometimes tell them that like my body has arrived, but my brain is not here yet, right? Like my brain's still kind of like finishing out the day and down in the office or whatever. And then they also know what to expect, because there have been a few times where I've been sitting at the dinner table and my daughter will say, Mommy, are you mad? And I'm like super confused because I don't feel mad in any way, and I don't feel like I'm showing any sort of signal of being mad. But then I realize, oh, it's because my brow's all furrowed and I'm like giving one word answers, right? No, I'm distracted. I'm not mad, right? There you go. Thank
you. I am absolutely flipping into our emotional intelligence slide for a moment, because that was a perfect segue.
Absolutely, right. So understanding yourself it is not a skill that we are born with, right? And that's actually why Shelly and I have jobs, right? Because like people need help understanding themselves and understanding others. And then we'll hop into in a little bit. This stuff is also interconnected, right? But then communicating what you know about yourself and asking other people to communicate what's going on with them. These are all really, really, really crucial skills, and they do impact the health of an organization so much, right? And so I think about like the level of emotional intelligence in my daughter when she was really trying to understand what's happening with your face, right? And her guess was incorrect, but she's 6 years old, of course it is, right? And my face looked angry, but it was distracted, right? And so really taking stock of what do we know about ourselves, and then maybe doing some exploring, some learning, right?
Yeah, and that works to allow us to recognize what's happening in a moment, right? Recognize how we're feeling, recognize what's going on in our body, recognize when we get heightened, whether we may or may not even be showing that, be able to kind of process that and to lean into it, right? To be empathetic with others. But at the same time to recognize, right, when our brow is furrowed and I'm looking angry, and now my entire team thinks I'm really pissed about something, and it turns out, like, nope, not at all. Just not paying attention to what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm communicating. Leads us into another slide, but knowing that we're not going to spend a lot of time here, because I don't think it was in the chat a whole lot, but it is something to absolutely make sure that you're doing a bit of work on and understanding, because again, it will scale from you to your team to the entire organization. And the more self-awareness there is among your team and for yourself, the easier it's going to be for everyone to navigate everything from boundaries to communication to creating a healthy culture.
Absolutely. And we are constantly giving people signals of what's going on, and our body is constantly giving us signals, and so many of those things get missed, right? And so really noticing and then asking to clarify can be so helpful. I don't know if anybody else has like found it, like since March, found new signals from their own bodies, but like I learned throughout the pandemic that apparently when I get really mad, my ears get really hot. And I did not know that was a thing, but this is like a new level of stress that I never realized before. And I sort of look at that as like, okay, thanks, body. Like, I got it. I understand. I am upset. I need to, calm down a little bit, but our body gives us so much information. We just have to listen. Yeah. So then the next topic is really communication and culture, which is that is the kind of the antidote to that isolation and disconnection. It is so possible to feel lonely even when you're in a room full of people, to feel abandoned, to feel just really, really alone, or to feel attacked, to feel like you constantly need to defend or explain, right? And I'm aware of the fact that we are having this conversation, in the Twin Cities, and I love Minnesota nice, but I also think that Minnesota nice can be a really, really tricky thing, because a lot of times what's also communicated is like, swallow your feelings, don't say anything controversial, and basically stifle your needs, right? That ends up, I don't know if anyone's ever heard the term Minnesota ice, but the first time that I heard that, it really made a lot of sense that like that when we are too nice, oftentimes we're keeping people at a distance, right? And an organization can't function when we can't communicate, right? So really finding a way to be brave and be honest, but also be open and understanding and empathetic. Those are skills that are just crucial. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ways that we've had founders think through this, and that we've worked with clients kind of think through some of the cultural aspects of communication and empathy, and some of the important values that you want to make sure that you're exuding, starting with yourself, right? But then also in the sense of how are we building the relationships, and what kind of support are we providing, is to just do a little exercise where you're listing out the healthy attributes you want to highlight in your organization, that you want to keep forward and paramount as part of the culture, so that you can be checking in with yourself, saying, how am I doing, right? How many times am I just kind of putting up that nice, right? when I really need to have a constructive conversation with someone, or how are we really interacting here? Are we providing the appropriate level of support? So there's a lot of internal work there, but then there's, of course, also among teams and organizations, a lot that goes into making sure that those things are in place intentionally. And so listing out kind of those healthy attributes, and then putting them in a place where you can check in regularly. How am I doing with this? How are we doing with this? And how can we do this better? It's really important to keep them top of mind.
Absolutely. Because really, and I think we've kind of mentioned this, but emotional states are so incredibly contagious, right? And so finding ways to communicate what we're feeling, and really like that increases the chances that that we can catch each other's good emotional states, as opposed to the really tricky ones, right? And I sometimes, when I think about like what it looks like for anxiety to transfer, or tension to transfer in a team, I think about like little meerkats, right? That have like one meerkat has kind of perked up and like signaled, is there danger, right? And then all the other ones, even if they didn't hear that noise or didn't see that thing or whatever, they perk up the same to just kind of match and to brace or whatever, right? And it could be that that one team member, is going through some stuff that has nothing to do with the organization, and they're just a little bit more tense, right? And if they're not able to communicate what's going on with them, it's really, really likely that the other people on the team will interpret those emotions, but then try and fill in the blanks themselves on like, okay, so why is she so tense right now? Why is he, seeming like so on edge? Like, is something wrong? So to be able to kind of put all of our cards on the table and say, yeah, sorry, I'm just like in a weird mood today, whatever. We open ourselves up for support, and then we also then stop the contagion of those emotional states, because if somebody else reflects our emotional state and then we see it and don't realize that they are catching our reflection, then we start to reflect them, and it can be this total trickle down effect. Yeah. I want to make sure we keep going to get to burnout and
yes, I think this is a really important one for this group, it sounds like.
Absolutely, because I mean, exhaustion and burnout, like, oh, we feel you. And it is hard to be a founder and to be well. And sometimes the idea of self-care and rest almost just feel laughable, right? Because if we can just kind of like keep our heads down and keep plowing forward, then we'll think about rest later, right? I mean, it's that sort of like I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of mentality, right? But we know, of course, that like that doesn't actually work, right? At some point, we will hit a wall, and things will all come crashing down with us if we haven't put the proper supports in place, right? And so looking at what can we do to find rest, to find relaxation, to sort of like take a mental break, and then knowing that that the efforts that we engage in are actually going to work is really important, right? Hence why we wanted to ask you guys at the beginning. We know that setting aside 45 minutes to join us to talk about wellness is a sacrifice, right? That is 45 minutes that was not spent on something else, either like working on business or sleeping, or like that came from somewhere, right? And so we want to make sure that it's impactful, right? And so really sort of evaluating what are the things that we do to take care of ourselves, and what works for us, because it might not be the thing that works for someone else, right? So I think looking at the efficiency of those particular coping strategies can be really, really important, because minutes are so limited, right?
Absolutely. And I often talk with people about how, right, our brains, right, are effectively, over the course of a day, a limited commodity, right? We wake in the morning and we have so much, and over the course of the day, we're depleting and depleting and depleting. And I often joke with people, that's the reason why I have the willpower and the motivation and like, you know, the mental capacity to say no to dark chocolate at 8 a.m., but at 8 p.m., all bets are off. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to happen. And it's because by the end of the day, right, we get pretty tapped out. We've got a lot to do. And over that course, we need to make sure that even in small incremental stages or places, we put in those restorative practices, whatever that looks like, so that we can. Kirsten, I'm with you too. So yeah, never say no to dark chocolate. That should be like, I kind of want that on a coffee mug or something.
Yeah.
We need to make those. I'm going to lose my train of thought because of dark chocolate. So we need to make sure that we're putting in these restorative practices, like Jen said, things that actually are effective for us, right? Because what works for one person may not work for the next. And when we talk about self-care, it's very different than what you see out there in popular culture, right? I'm not talking about like, I don't know, bubble baths, or for, I don't know, during pandemic, getting a haircut, right? True self-care. But realistically, what we're talking about can often be getting a little more sleep at night, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you're carving out just a bit of that, it can go a long way toward you waking up with a bit more brain space, right? Or maybe that looks like just some very practical things. Maybe that's delegating. Right. Maybe that there's lots of things that can kind of fall into what allows us to then take 5 minutes to ourselves to do, you know, a little mindfulness exercise or something, if that works for a person. But just taking a moment to slow down, gather ourselves, right, can allow us to be more productive, to have more creativity. There are tremendous bonuses for us being able to focus in a better way if we're being mindful, first of all, of like, where are we at, right? And understanding our level of exhaustion and our emotional state and things like that. But then taking those moments and identifying what specific things really work for me. Mm-hmm. That's the question we all need to come to. What are the things that actually work for me? Because what works for Jen may not work for me, right? And vice versa. And so identifying those and kind of creating your own strategic plan around restoring is pretty essential.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, so Alex, I'm so glad that you said that, because when you look at the quality of your work is dropping. So I think that, like, I was going to chime in a little bit about this, that when we think about like the importance of rest, oftentimes we just think like, yeah, but that's just for our comfort, and I can be uncomfortable in order to accomplish my goals, right? But like, actually, rest is very, very crucial to reaching your goals, right? It's not just about comfort, right? So if really you want to think about resting as a way to achieve more, that is one way to look at it and think about it, right? And so it I think is true for most people, many people, at least, that we have different times in the day where our efficiency level just changes throughout the day, right? And for many people, we start out extremely efficient and get less and less efficient throughout the day, right? And so then if we look at, okay, well, wouldn't it be better for me to cut out some of those like less efficient hours, right? And spend my time there actually relaxing or resting or doing whatever I need to do to restore. And then maybe I can get out of bed a little bit earlier in the morning because I've gotten enough sleep and I haven't just like been mindlessly scrolling through Instagram or getting caught like, binging some garbage show when actually our brains just want to be sleeping. If we place our self-care time in our less efficient hours, then we can even increase our efficiency in those other hours, or even create more efficient hours at the time of day where our body wants to do that.
Yeah, there's actually a tremendous amount. I'm such a nerd. I love research. So reading recently all of the research that's come out in the last decade about like sleep and what it does to our brains and to our productivity, and how it effectively allows us to function so much better, right? If we get that 7 hours instead of 5 hours, even though in theory we gain 2, we actually lose like 6, right? In terms of productive time. And it's, I'm a nerd, it's fascinating to me. But it's true, right? That if we can, and I think I just saw another comment pop up about that, right? That recovery is required for resilience, and it's required for us to function well. Humans have like a recycle rate, like a physical and mental recycle rate of like 16 hours. After 16 hours, right, of functioning, we need an appropriate amount of restoring and recovering and sleeping, because all of the research is showing that we effectively have shut down at that point, right? And we are not nearly doing the work that we think we are. Our brains can trick us in that way, right? So there's so much that's useful in these restorative practices.
And really, of all the practices that we've discussed today, I think that this very well may be the most important, because it is necessary for the other ones to work, right? You cannot hold healthy boundaries or find balance when you're burnt out and exhausted. It does not work, right? You cannot be emotionally intelligent and really listen to yourself or listen to other people when you're not firing on all cylinders, when your brain is stuck in the clouds, right? And you really can't appropriately communicate or listen when you're fatigued, whether that's, fatigued mentally, fatigued physically. We talk a lot about compassion fatigue too. That is a big sign of burnout. When you find yourself just like not really giving a shit about other people, that's a great indicator of burnout. And so really this one is just crucial for all the other ones to work. Yeah.
So Alex, there's a great book, and I'm going to keep flipping kind of slides because I know we're in our end time. But Alex, there's a great book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And it kind of aggregates a lot of the data that's come out in the last 20 years about sleep. It's really fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us today. And if anyone has any questions or wants to, reach out and share something, we're always open to that. We love to talk to founders. And so, we just want to be of service any way that we possibly can. So thank you all so much for joining for today. And thanks for taking the time to focus on taking care of yourself.
Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. I should be on LinkedIn. You can, Pearson, I hope that's how you pronounce your name. You connected with Jen on LinkedIn. Oh, I'll find you then. I'll hop onto hers and I'll look for your name if that works. Otherwise, you can connect to me through UCW Therapy as well. I'm sure to find you.
Yeah. we'll make sure to hold on to your name. I'm just grabbing that right now. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks for coming. These are our favorite topics to chat about.
Yes. Take care.